tiaram, badam, tiaram, badam, tiaram, bada, tiadadadadadam. Tidam, badam, tiaram, badam, tadam, badam. Hello. Today I'm going to talk to you about a great and strangely fertile Spanish playwright called Lope de Vega. And as my honored guest, I have my favorite American author, Mr. Thornton Wilder. Be back with you in a moment. I have to confess to you that for many years, among all American authors, I've loved Thornton Wilder. I have read and reread and reread The Bridge of San Luis Rey and my favorite of all, The Ides of March. And I've acted out to myself Our Town and The Skin of Our Teeth. But I've never met him. It's strange because among theatrical people you usually meet the authors, but I've never met Thornton Wilder, though I've always looked out for him. But I know friends of his, and whenever I can, I guide the conversation into channels that finally end up with, and how is Thornton Wilder? And what is he doing now? And you know, whenever I ask that question, I hear he's doing so-and-so, he's writing so-and-so, and at the end there's always one postscript. And you know, Lilli, he's still busy with his Lope de Vega. And that started to intrigue me. Now, what could there be about Lope de Vega that kept a brain like Thornton Wilder's busy for 5 years, 8 years? So I started to read Lope de Vega. All I knew was that he was a Spanish playwright at the same time, lived at the same time as Shakespeare did in the 16th century, and that he'd written over 700 plays. That's all I knew. So I started to read one or two plays, and I think I found out the charms, the hidden charms of Lope de Vega. So I sat down and wrote a letter to Thornton Wilder. I knew that if I asked him to come and let me talk about him or about his work, he would never come. But if I'd say, let's talk about Lope de Vega, that would be bait. And do you know? He came. And here he is, Thornton Wilder. Tell me, Mr. Wilder, why could a man write 700 plays when Shakespeare wrote only between 30 and 40, something like that? Yes. How is it possible?
Well, it's one of the interesting things about Lope, how of all the authors in the first and second rank, he is the largest output. I think there are about 4 reasons. One was for money. In the late Renaissance, they liked to keep up as large a state as possible.
He had several households. He had a large heart.
He loved family life so much that he had several.
Yes. That's number 1. Number 2.
2 was envy of other authors. There was a wonderful crowd of dramatists around him at the time.
As good as he?
Some people would say so. And so that when one of these other dramatists wrote a splendid play, it stung him, and he tried to cap it.
It's very much like the Elizabethan equivalent of Shakespeare and his contemporaries. At exactly the same time, there was a little crowd of English playwrights writing in England. Do you think they knew of each other, Shakespeare and Lope de Vega?
The relations of Spain and England were very touchy at that time, but we may show later that there was some knowledge of one another.
Now, we have 2 reasons for his output. Number 3. Any other reason?
Well, when we imagine him going to his desk every morning to work all morning, surely, for this immense output, I think another reason was that in his writing, he often in cipher put his daily life. He wrote about all around him.
What happened
a secret confession.
Oh, I see. Just like as if there was a newspaper of the day in Lope's plays?
A private journal.
A private journal. I see. That's where the 700 plays come in. They're fascinating. One of them I read called Fuente Ovejuna. That means a sheep well. Would that be right? Which is an astonishing play, if you read it now. It's practically, it's got such social significance and such class warfare that I believe it's played quite a lot in the Soviet Union nowadays. And I think they probably take out the end where the king comes and sanctions the villages uprising against the wicked overlord. I think they take that one out, but they make use of the class warfare in it. Imagine in the 16th century somebody writing like that.
And he did a good many plays of even the violence of the social condition. And it's, as you say, it's surprising that he got away with it in that time.
I see. And how could one judge success in those days? There were no newspapers or critics.
We judged success by the fact that there were about 8 companies authorized by the king, and the best companies and the greatest success would come those who were invited to play before the court at the great theatrical season of the year.
That then was a successful play, and it ran how long?
Well, 8 performances was good. There is a report of one play that went 23 performances, which was supposed to be a 4-year run.
Like Tobacco Road.
Yes,
Something like that. Did they travel, these plays, once they'd finished, let's say, in the capital? Did they go to other towns as well?
There was a law requiring a company to leave after playing 3 months in any great city.
Why is that?
Well, half the receipts of all the plays at the theaters of those age were given to hospitals for orphans and the destitute and the aged. So that it was important the receipts be as big as possible. At 3 months, the company would begin to fall off in its attendance, bring in a new company for good receipts.
Isn't that an extraordinary thing? Half the receipts to the orphanages. I suppose this was to kind of conciliate the Inquisition. I'm sure the Inquisition didn't like the stage and all it stood for.
Time after time, once the theaters were closed because of the severity of the Inquisition, for 2 years and a half, the children's hospitals were starving, the actors were starving, appeals made them, so that always the shadow of disapproval hung on the theater. So it would open and shut and open and shut.
And tell me, we all know that Shakespeare was an actor and wrote his plays for his company. Was it the same with Lope de Vega? Was he an actor too to start with? Did he ever act?
There's a sneer in one of the poets that he was once an actor, but as far as we know, he was never an actor.
Did he write for companies existing?
The manager of a company would come to him and say, "Maestro, I have the appointment at court this year. Will you please give me 12 plays for my seat?" And one of the fascinating things is, helping us date the plays, is the maestro would say, "Remember, my wife is tall and has blue eyes. Remember that I have a wonderful child actor. And remember, I have a tame lion. Please introduce those as far as possible into each play."
And he did that, and we have several plays where the blue-eyed and the blonde lady and the tame lion and the child actor are in various situations.
Whole set, yes.
A wonderful thing.
Well, I often wish that with the similarities that there were still more, because you gather from the writing of the plays and from the anecdotes we have that there was such a passion for theater on the part of everybody in Spain, such an appetite to see more and more plays, that the town discussed the rivalry of dramatists and the rivalry of actors. It made wonderful publicity, and that's what we need more in our time.
And that's extraordinary, because in those days there were other entertainments. There was a bullfight and tournaments. Tell me, when you read Lope de Vega's plays now, are they written in ancient Spanish? Do you have to learn a special language, or is it very much the same as the Spanish of today?
It's extraordinary how it's much the same Spanish as now. It is not as remote from us, apparently, as Elizabethan English is.
Did he use a large vocabulary?
Fairly large for his time, but nothing like what Shakespeare and his contemporaries used.
How many words did Shakespeare use?
The report is that there's a census of 25,000 words at Shakespeare's hand.
Very few people of today would use a vocabulary of 25,000 words, would they?
Oh, the average person goes through life with 4,500.
That gives you an idea
Yes.
of Shakespeare's language.
Yes.
Then I wanted to ask you, what social standing did the actors have in Lope de Vega's day?
Almost none at all. They were identified with horse thieves and wandering gypsies.
Were they allowed at court?
They played at court, but I think probably they didn't mingle with the guests, so to speak.
And were women allowed to act? You remember, in Shakespeare's time, no woman was allowed to act, and he wrote, this was even a consideration, wasn't it, for Shakespeare, that every woman's part had to be played by boy actors. I would have liked to see Cleopatra played by a boy actor in Shakespeare's time.
We've had the pleasure of seeing you play Cleopatra, so we don't want anything else.
Thank you. But in Lope de Vega's Spain, were actresses allowed, or was it?
1588, they began to come and act on the stage, but always at the point of being prohibited.
But were there star actresses?
Indeed, there were.
So they were a little more advanced than in England, in that respect.
Well, yes.
It's much easier to have a man and a woman play opposite each other than a man with a wig. Tell me, why can't we nowadays play Lope de Vega? Because I find him absolutely fascinating to read.
Many of the ways of his telling a story on the stage are wrapped up in conventions which we no longer could accept.
For instance?
Oh, at the climax of a scene, an actor, the audience loved to see an actor come down and recite a sonnet. To us, that would seem to stop the action. But the Spanish audiences loved it, and to them it did not interrupt what was going on the stage.
I see. Because I tell you, I found his plays most modern. For instance, imagine there is in one play, The Star of Seville, which maybe not by Lope de Vega, there is the conventional love story. Man and a woman very much in love with each other. Comes the king who desires the lady, and complications ensue. And the lover has to murder his beloved's brother. In the end, all complications are smoothed out. The lovers are left alone. You expect them to sink into each other's arms. And the lady looks at the man and says, you know, I don't think I can go through with it. When I look at you in the morning after breakfast, I would always remember all the terrible things we had to go through. I think we better call it off. And they do. And that's the end of the play. Most modern. Tell me, was Lope already famous in his day?
Lope was so famous in his day that his name became a word meaning excellent, and a lady of the court admiring another's dress would say, it's simply Lope.
Mr. Wilder, all I can say is it was simply Lope of you to come today.
Thank you, Miss Palmer.
And now, I shall be back with you in a moment to talk about my next program. Next time, I'm going to talk to you about that great genius of the French stage, Miss Sarah Bernhardt. And as my guest, I shall show you a little piece of silent film of hers. Until then, auf Wiedersehen, tiadam, badam, tiadam, bada, tiadadadadam, tidam, badam, tiadam, badam, ta-dam, ba-dee-dee-ya-da-da-da-da-da.